Hare Krishna. Welcome
Hare
to
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Welcome to the Bhagavad Gita class. Sorry for the delay in getting started. Just some organizing stuff. So let us start with the Mangalacharan prayers. So share the screen. So this is our Veda-based website, Bhagavad Gita as it is. Introduction is where we have the prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So we are resuming chapter 6, and my very wishful thinking is to complete chapter 6 today. We will see how much we are successful. We are already 10 minutes late before even starting, so we will see. And if I forget to say in the end, wish you all a very happy new year, those in India where the new year has started, and very soon happy new year to all those for those who it will start in a few hours.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Thank you.
We wish you the same, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Okay, so resuming chapter 6. So this is perhaps the most important part of today's class. So those who have joined early or like on time, so to say, will benefit from this. So what are the main points of Dhyana Yoga or chapter 6? Main points of chapter 6. This includes a quick recap of last session, but overall I am going to describe what are the main points of chapter 6. So the main points of chapter 6 is that the primary process of Dhyana Yoga is what? Controlling the mind. And the second part is the goal is Paramatma realization. And if you don't know or are forgetting what is Paramatma realization, please refer to the previous class. But Paramatma is the Vishnu Murti form, the four-handed form of Vishnu residing in every living entity. And the summary of Paramatma realization is given in the 7th verse chapter 6, 7th verse. So this is a valid, perfectly valid spiritual process. It's not something that is invalid. And it contains 8 steps. Therefore, it is also called Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, 8 steps or 8 limbs. And we went over those 8 limbs last time. But here is the main point. The main point of chapter 6. Now, again, I must give a quick clarification. Chapter 6, verses 1 to 32. Because last time I said chapter 6 is more or less divided into 2 parts. So we will cover that. 1 to 32 is Dhyana Yoga. And then 33 to 47 is, how should I put it? What happens to those who fail to perform Dhyana Yoga? I would say that it is the impracticality. Impracticality of DY. DY means Dhyana Yoga. So that is the 5th point of chapter 6. Somebody kindly mute. The 5th point is that it is very, very impractical for this age, and especially we can say Kali Yuga. It is extremely impractical for Kali Yuga. And even Arjuna says this. Arjuna, who is very, very controlled, he has no problem in controlling his mind. After all, he can fire all these powerful astras like Brahmastra and this and that. You have to be very controlled in your mind to do that. Even he says this is very, very impractical. So these are the main points of chapter 6. Then this last point begets the question, since it is very, very impractical, so why is Lord Krishna speaking or including the Dhyana Yoga in Bhagavad Gita? If it is impractical, then why is Lord Krishna talking about it at all? What is the purpose? There are 2 purposes. The first purpose is for sake of completeness. For sake of completeness means that one should know what to do and what not to do. Both. When, for those of you doing Bhakti Shastri, or maybe sometime later we will hold a class on Shri Ishopanishad, which is one of the 11 most important Upanishads, and it is done, we study that Upanishad as part of the Bhakti Shastri. We study 4 books in that, including Bhagavad Gita. So in Ishopanishad, and the Upanishads are basically coming down from time immemorial. It's not like Bhagavad Gita, which has been spoken by Lord Krishna, as he had said in chapter 4, I come and say this again and again because the knowledge is forgotten. Ishopanishad is part of the Vedas, and it was transmitted by Lord Vishnu to Brahmaji at the beginning of the creation of the universe. So anyway, in Ishopanishad, Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu says one must have knowledge of both Vidya plus Avidya. You must know both, because you need to know what to adopt and what to avoid, both. So if you go to a doctor, he knows everything about the medicine. So we generally, in our Bhagavad Gita class, we give two very common examples: doctors and mothers. So doctor-patient relationship and mother's-child relationship. These are two very common relationships we talk about. So in a doctor case, doctor knows about the medicines, how to cure, but he also knows everything about the disease, how the disease works. If you do not know how the disease works, how will you find or give a cure? So how to avoid the disease and how to counteract the disease, or in some certain way, what to avoid and what to adopt. So for sake of completeness, Lord Krishna is giving this knowledge of Dhyana Yoga. And the second purpose of why Lord Krishna is speaking about Dhyana Yoga is so that we can dovetail, we can apply, you can say, the principles of Dhyana Yoga in Bhakti Yoga. This is called as Dhyan Mishra Bhakti. Just like in the 4th chapter, when we were going through it, I had described Gyan Mishra Bhakti. Bhakti that is mixed with Gyan. In the same way, Bhakti mixed with Dhyan, or Dhyan mixed with Bhakti. Bhakti is the main, but Dhyan is mixed in it. So this is Dhyan Mishra Bhakti. And Lord Krishna will explain a little bit about it in chapter 8. After he has described Bhakti in detail in chapter 7. And the verses are approximately 8.9 to 8.13, I believe. We can go over it, but 8.8 or 8.9 it starts, goes up to 8.13. Few verses, we see a very clear description of Dhyan Mishra Bhakti, how Bhakti can be performed through the process of Dhyana Yoga. So these are the two main aspects of why Lord Krishna is including the discussion of Dhyana Yoga in Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, why bother? This is why Lord Krishna bothers. This is why it is there. Okay, so this was a very important discussion for the last 10 minutes. We started at 6:40 and now it is 6:50. So what are the main points of chapter 6? There are 5 main points in chapter 6. And why is Lord Krishna including Dhyana Yoga discussion? Is because of these two reasons: for sake of completeness, so that we know what to do, which is Bhakti, and what to avoid, which is Dhyana Yoga. Or in other words, apply the principles of Dhyana Yoga, not in letter, but in spirit. You know, there is something called letter and spirit of anything, of a document or of the law or the principle. So not the letter, not following it word by word as a prescription, but in spirit, in an essence level, at a principle concept level, apply Dhyana Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. So in today's discussion, so last week we had completed 6.1 to 6.9, where a sort of a high level description, which can say it's the what, description of Dhyana Yoga was covered, the what. Now from 6.10 to 6.17, the how will be covered, which means the process. So while we are discussing this process of Dhyana Yoga, I will explain, or I will attempt to explain how to apply or dovetail Dhyana Yoga to Bhakti Yoga. Okay. One sec. So the how part we will discuss. So 6.10. So I will mainly go over the English portions in the beginning verses, or a lot of the verses, because of the reason that it's a Dhyana Yoga is not something that we are directly going to apply, or that is not Lord Krishna's direct instruction. And the main focus will be how we can apply the principles in Bhakti Yoga. So text number 10. A transcendentalist should always engage his body, mind, and self in relationship with the Supreme. He should live alone in a secluded place and should always carefully control his mind. He should be free from desires and feelings of possessiveness. So the second line of this verse says that ekaki yat chittatma nirashir aparigraha. Ekaki yat chittatma. Ekaki means ekaki, akele, sort of a Hindi word. Alone. Ekaki means with nobody else. Yata chittatma, controlling the mind. Chitta means mind. Nirashi means without having any asha, without having any desires of material sense gratification. Aparigraha means without the feeling of proprietorship. So just a quick point on these two words, nirasha and aparigraha. Nirasha means without desires, and this means without proprietorship. So without desires means it applies to things you do not have, and this applies to things you do have. So what you do not have, don't hanker for it. And what you do have, don't think you are the Lord, you are the proprietor, you are the owner. Any day, any moment, it could get taken away from you. So with that consciousness of no desires, nirasha, and no proprietorship, aparigraha, one has to live his life. So next verse, 6.11. So we'll go to a new page. And Srila Prabhupada and all other acharyas, not just Srila Prabhupada, have combined 6.11 and 12 into one verse. So please, as we are discussing this, please think about it, that can you do this literally in letter? And when we say letter and spirit, can you do it in letter? Can you exactly do this? Is it practical? It will give you the realization that how impractical and how infeasible this process is. What's going on? Can you still see what I scribbled? For some reason, it's not appearing.
Yes, we can. Yes, Prabhu.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, now it appeared here on my end. Okay, good. So 6.11 and 12. To practice yoga, one should go to a secluded place and should lay kusha grass on the ground. Kusha grass is a specific type of soft grass. So it makes the place a little bit comfortable to sit on. Kusha grass on the ground and cover it with deer skin and a soft cloth. So deer skin doesn't mean you kill a deer. When such a person is dhyana yogi, is going into the forest, he may already find a dead deer and the deer skin can be used. So one should not think that you should kill a deer for this purpose. And why deer skin? Because it has certain antiseptic properties or any properties which when any insects come or snakes come, it repels. So insects and snakes do not come and near the deer skin. So that is the purpose of deer skin. And therefore the yogi can sit comfortably without being disturbed by insects or snakes or other harmful animals like that. The seat should neither be too high nor too low and should be situated in a sacred place. Shuchau deshe pratisthaya. That's what it means. Situated in a sacred place. The yogi should then sit on it very firmly and practice yoga to purify the heart by controlling his mind. By controlling his mind, senses, and activities, and fixing the mind on one point. Now, in a later verse, we will see how Lord Krishna says you should focus on the tip of your nose, or in the previous chapter, it was said focusing between the eyebrows. It's very, very difficult to do this. So, what is the learning for us? Learning for
Impractical.
Yes, that is one realization, that it is impractical. It is very difficult to sit still, and sit alone. Very difficult to do that. But in bhakti, you do not have to sit still and you do not have to sit alone. You can work like a donkey. Keep doing work like a donkey. The only condition is for Krishna. Work like a donkey, work like a dog, but work for Krishna. You don't have to sit still. If you want to learn how to work like a donkey or how to work like so hard for Krishna, you should read Acharya biographies. A very great Acharya is right in front of us, Srila Prabhupada. So, example, Srila Prabhupada. And his biography is available on vedabase.com or another vedabase.io, same website. Let me show you. So here is our Vedabase. We go to library and you see this book here at the top, Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. Leelamrita means his Leela or his entire pastimes. His biography is complete biography is given here. So you can see how he was engaged. He didn't go to a forest. He went to America, to London, to Bombay, Delhi, all these places. He wasn't sitting still, and he was not alone either. He was not alone. He was with devotees. So we can be with devotees. We do not have to be alone. We do not have to be still. We can work for Krishna. We can be with devotees. No need to engage the mind on the nose or on the tip of the nose or between the eyebrows. We can engage the mind on Krishna Katha, which is very, very interesting. So this is to engage the mind. Mind can be engaged on Krishna Katha. The single pointed aim, the Krishna Katha has a lot of variegatedness, or lot of, in simple words, variety, has a lot of variety. So when Lord Krishna says, focus your mind on one thing, the one thing is that the consciousness is on Krishna, but with a lot of variety. So consciousness is on Krishna singularly. Okay, not on Amitabh Bachchan, not on Aishwarya Rai, but on Krishna. So with a single pointed aim, one should serve Krishna. No need to sit alone, sit with devotees. No need to sit still. Work for Krishna, engage all your senses. And like this, you can be a devotee. So next, 13 to 14. So one should hold. So again, we should see here how is this practical? Answer will be no. And how we can utilize this in bhakti. One should hold one's neck, one's body, neck, and head erect in a straight line and stare steadily at the tip of the nose. So stare steadily at the tip of the nose, very hard. Thus, with an unagitated, subdued mind, devoid of fear, completely free from sex life, one should meditate upon me within the heart and make me the ultimate goal of life. So here Lord Krishna is talking about disengaging the various sense organs. So we don't need to disengage the various sense organs. We can engage the various sense organs. And in the service of Krishna, very beautiful example was given in the case of Ambarish Maharaj. And we had covered that, and Srila Prabhupada has talked about that set of verses at two places in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, and earlier in chapter 6. This is Canto 9, chapter 4, verse number 18 to 20. Very beautifully, it is described how Ambarish Maharaj was engaging all his senses in Lord Krishna's service. So, in the last two lines of 6.14, last two lines, Lord Krishna is saying, Manah sanyamya mat chitto yukta asita matparaha. So, the words that are coming are mat chitto and mat paraha. So mat here means me or on me. So focusing the mind on me. Now here, for those who are dhyana yogis, the understanding is Paramatma. Because Paramatma is no different from Krishna. But for bhakti yogis, the understanding is not Paramatma, it is direct perception of Bhagavan, Krishna. Krishna or Rama or Narsingha or so many others, doesn't have to be just Lord Krishna, but so direct perception of Bhagavan. So here the Mat Chitta and Mat Paraha are significant, and that has two interpretations. In Dhyana Yoga interpretation, it means Paramatma, whereas in Bhakti Yoga, it is direct Bhagavan. And this Lord Krishna will clarify that both, they are not different from each other, but the Bhagavan realization is sweeter and higher than the Paramatma realization. This will come in chapter 6 a little bit later. Okay. And then text number 15, 6.15, the destination. What is the destination? The first destination is Shanti. And the second destination, Lord Krishna says, is my destination. Or you can say my home. The Sanskrit that is used is mat sthanam. So, thus practicing, so 6.15 translation, thus practicing constant control of the body, mind, and activities, the mystic transcendentalist, his mind regulated, attains to the kingdom of God or the abode of Krishna by cessation of material existence. So, in this way, one achieves the highest destination, which is Krishna himself. So the last line again, this says, Shantim nirvanam paramam mat sthanam adhigacchati. So when one controls the mind and follows this dhyana yoga process, the first thing is he achieves Shanti. he achieves peace, complete peace, and nirvanam. Nirvanam paramam, the highest nirvana. So just in contrast, in chapter 5, the term that was used in the last few verses was Brahma Nirvanam Gacchati or Brahma Nirvanam Adhigacchati. So here it is Nirvanam Paramam. So there is a slight contrast here, which also indicates that the goal of Jnana Yoga, which is what is the topic of discussion in chapter 5, is Brahma Nirvanam, but this is Nirvanam Paramam. You still get Nirvana, but this is higher, Nirvanam Paramam. That's the description or the commentary given by Acharyas, that this is a higher destination, Paramam. Otherwise, Lord Krishna could have used Brahma Nirvanam here or Nirvana Paramam in chapter 5, but he did not. So that contrast has to be drawn. Anyhow, the word Shanti, this word Shanti comes very strongly in 5.29. It's a very important verse which starts with Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram Suhridam Sarvabhutanam Gyatva Mam Shantim Rachati. And here what Lord Krishna is saying, Shantim Adhigacchati. So similar. Again, Shantim is in the beginning of the line and Adhigacchati is in the end of the line. But still, I'm just combining those two words. Shantim Nirvana Paramam Mat Samstham Adhigacchati. But a better way to attain Shanti is by bhakti to Lord Krishna, knowing that he is our friend, he is our protector. Just try this out. Try out the process of attaining peace. It is a much, much better and a much, much more practical, and you can directly apply it. Otherwise, by controlling the mind, attaining Shanti is very hard. It has to have a lot of practice and a lot of dhyana yoga. But just depending on Krishna, that whatever Krishna is doing is for my benefit. Even if something I thought I should get and I did not get, I was hankering for it and I did not get it. Or I had something and it was taken away. We must think that it is for our benefit. We were not going to, it was not, if we got it, it would not have benefited us. It would have been counterproductive. Or if it was taken away, it is good because it would have harmed us in the long run. And ultimately, Lord Krishna is our friend, Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. And he is always our well-wisher, always our protector. There is this very important verse, the 6 limbs of Sharan. Sharan means of taking shelter of Krishna. And the 4th item in that is, or the 3rd item, sorry, as I'm reciting the verse in my mind, Rakshi Shyati Iti Vishwaso. Rakshishyati Iti Vishwaso. What this means is that having the Vishwas, that Krishna will do our Raksha. He will protect us. Whatever he is doing is for our protection. A small child, for example, if he's given a vaccine, at that moment he may cry, oh, why are they poking me with a needle? But it is for the child's protection. So in that moment, it may feel painful. Something is taken away from us, or something we wanted was not given to us. But ultimately, it is for our long-term benefit, long-term protection. When we think in this way, so much Shanti is there, so much. I have tried to apply this principle in our life, both me and my wife. So many times we have felt so so much peace, so much calm, so much tranquility in our life that it, even very big things didn't bother us that much. So this Rakshishyati iti Vishwaso is a very, very important point. And if this whole verse you want to see, it is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita in the purport of 18.66. Very, very important verse, the most important verse of Bhagavad Gita, by the way. But we won't go through that today. We will just focus on this verse. This is given by Sri Sanatana Goswami in Hari Bhakti Vilas. So this is the line. The third line is this. Rakshishyati iti Vishwaso. Please remember this. This whole verse, you should print it in bold font, put it in your bedroom or wherever you spend most of the time in your day. Make it the wallpaper of your smartphone, of your computer. This verse, you should know by heart. And not only the verse, the whole meaning you should know. This is a super, super, super duper important verse. And this goes like Anukulyasya sankalpah pratikulyasya varjanam rakshishyati iti vishwaso goptritve varnam tatha atma nikshepa karpanye shad vidha sharanagatihi. So these are the 6 limbs. Shad vidha. Shad means 6. Vidha means processes of sharanagati. How to take sharan of Krishna. And very quickly, anukulyasya sankalpah means doing that which is favorable to Krishna. Pratikulyasya varjanam means avoiding. Varjana means avoid. Avoid everything that is pratikul, that is not favorable for Krishna consciousness. Third one is what we are talking about, Rakshishyati iti Vishwaso, having this faith that Krishna is always our friend, is always our well-wisher, is always our protector. Whatever is happening to me is for my protection. And then see the peace that descends in your life. Just try it out. This is not some theory. This is not pravachan. If you are thinking that this is a pravachan class, leave. Please leave. There is not a pravachan. This is not theory. This is extremely, extremely practical. Rakshishyati iti Vishwaso, having that faith that Krishna will protect us. So like this verse goes, Goptritve varnam tatha atmanikshepa karpanye shadvida sharana. So we need to make progress, otherwise we'll never finish. So we will continue. So that is the Shanti process. And then Mat Samstham Adhigachati. Mat Samstham Adhigachati means he comes to my destination. He comes to me. So we will talk about that in the next few verses, about that Mat Samstham. So 6.16. So that is how we can get Shanti, through bhakti. This is the process of getting Shanti through dhyana. But what I explained is Shanti through bhakti. Now 6.16. This talks about eating and sleeping. So it says, there is no possibility of one's becoming a yogi, O Arjuna, if one eats too much or eats too little, sleeps too much or does not sleep enough. So again, the Lord Krishna is directly saying, even in Dhyana Yoga, you have to take care of your body. Completely stopping to eat, completely stopping to sleep is not recommended. And definitely in bhakti, the meaning of eating is eating only Krishna Prasad. So that is the meaning of eating. Eating too much or eating too little. Not eating too much means not eating things that are not offered to Krishna, but only eating Krishna Prasad. Sleeping, one should not sleep too much or sleep too little. The bhakti understanding is during day, work hard for Krishna. And then during night, what will Krishna do in return? Daytime is our time, night time is Krishna's time. He will come in our dreams. And then our sleep will be extremely peaceful. We are going through the story of Ajamila in the Srimad Bhagavatam classes. And there it is written that those who are devotees of Krishna, scary thoughts or scary dreams will never come. They will always have very, very sweet and peaceful dreams. So that is how we apply this principle in bhakti, of how to eat and how to sleep. Eat Krishna Prasad, nothing else, and sleep. When you work for Krishna during the day, Krishna will make sure that your sleep is very, very sweet. And he will, if you are really a very good devotee, he will come in your sleep. So 6.17 is a summary. So quickly we will go through that. He who is regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, recreation, vihara, recreation and work, cheshtasya karmasu, anything that you do, can mitigate all material pains by practicing the yoga system. So whatever we do for Krishna. That is the Bhakti Yoga understanding. So that is 6.17 is a summary. Now 6.18 to 23 is the stage of perfection. In Dhyana Yoga. So what happens when you attain the goal of Dhyana Yoga? What is your state? What is this? What is that situation? So 18 and 19 is talking about the state of a completely controlled mind. So this is 18 and 19 is the analogy of a lamp in a windless place. So in that stage of completely controlled mind, the mind does not go anywhere else. It stays with you. So when the yogi, so 6.18, when the yogi by practice of yoga disciplines his mental activities and becomes situated in transcendence, devoid of all material desires, he is said to be well established in yoga. So there is the state of no desires, nisprihaha sarva kamebhyo. So when he is, all the kama, all the desires are removed. Yukta itya uchyate tada. So that is the state of Dhyana Yoga. And 19th verse, as a lamp in a windless place does not waver, so the transcendentalist whose mind is controlled remains always steady in his meditation on the transcendent self. So he remains completely steady. The mind is completely controlled. So that is 6.18 and 19. And Acharyas combine 20 to 23 into one single verse. And this is the state of Samadhi. The state of the highest stage. So in those 8 stages, the last one is Samadhi state. What Lord Krishna calls here as the state of Yoga Sanjitam. So Yoga Sanjitam means that when the mind is completely in oneness with his self, he has completely seen the self, or he has seen the Paramatma. And when he has attained the result of Dhyana Yoga, that is the state of Samadhi, the state of trance. So we will quickly read the translation of this. In the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities by the practice of yoga. This perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness, realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth, and upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. This indeed is actual freedom from all miseries arising from material contact. So, for devotees of the Lord, they are also never shaken in the face of any miseries. So one is never shaken, it is written, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. A very, very wonderful example is Prahlad Maharaj. Maharaj we say because he is later on he became the king after Hiranyakashipu was killed. Even when he was a child, he was Maharaj. Maharaj is a way to honor a devotee. But even when he was a child, he was a pure devotee and his father was trying to kill him. So imagine somebody is trying to repeatedly assassinate you, repeatedly kill you. One would say that is one of the greatest difficulties. And he was not shaken at all. And there are so many other examples of devotees who were not shaken in the midst of greatest difficulties. There are every single devotee actually is an example. In Chaitanya Leela, there is Haridas Thakur. In Srimad Bhagavatam, we saw Ambarish Maharaj when Durvasa Muni creates this huge demon. He did not even move an inch. He accepted that whole situation. Parikshit Maharaj, when he was cursed, he did not get deviated. He was very fixed. Bali Maharaj, when Vamandev said, I have occupied all your property with 2 of my steps. Where should I put my 3rd step? He was so happy with that because he now knew that the 3rd step will be on my head. And what is a better place to take shelter of my head? I will force him to give me the shelter of his feet. So he was very happy. Even though everything was taken away from him, he got the shelter of the lotus feet of Vamanadev. So that is the situation of pure devotees. They are never shaken by any misery. And that is the bhakti stage of samadhi. That one is completely absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and knowing that Krishna is my protector and nothing else no misery can shake me. Okay. Now, so let me see from my notes if anything else I wanted to say on this. No, I guess that's a good summary. If there are any questions or anything, please raise your hand or put the questions in the chat. If in the absence of that, I will keep going on. So 6.24 to 26, very, very, very important verses. Very important verses. In fact, one of these is a verse that we ask devotees to memorize as part of the Bhakti Shastri. You have to memorize almost 45-50 verses for the whole course, and you have to reproduce them in a test. So one of them is 6.26. So that's why I'm just saying, please pay attention. These are very important verses, 24, 25, and 26. And the importance is that we have to control our mind even in bhakti, not to such a great extent as in dhyana yoga, focusing on the tip of the nose or wherever, and doing all those things, sitting in a secluded place and this and that. We don't have to do that, but still we have to control our mind. our mind is programmed to go towards sense gratification. So we still have to control our mind quite a lot. I would be lying if I say you have to control your mind a little bit. You have to control it quite a lot. Especially in bhakti, we will very soon introduce the process of japa, or chanting the name of Krishna, or the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. You have to control your mind. You cannot just be doing japa of Krishna's name and be thinking about the movie you watched yesterday or the movie you will be watching tomorrow. That would be a wandering mind. So all these, this learning of how to control the mind is important even in bhakti. So how to control the mind? For beginners. So 6.24 says, with determination and faith. These are the two components: determination and faith. So one should engage. So 6.24, one should engage oneself in the practice of yoga with determination and faith and not be deviated from the path. One should abandon without exception all material desires born of mental speculation and thus control all the senses on all sides by the mind. So what does this mean? This means that the concept of faith, the faith, when I said, let me see who can remember. This is now a quiz question. What is the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? The biggest reason for downfall of a devotee? Or
forgetting Krishna. Forgetting
biggest,
Krishna. Forgetting Krishna.
Okay, but in a little bit more practical terms.
Doubting.
Yes, very good. Whoever said that, that is the thing, doubts. And doubts can be very subtle or very straightforward. Subtle means very hidden, or very straightforward. That, oh, this is just pravachan. I was really struck by somebody who few days back said, oh, I spent 2 hours talking in a class very, strongly that please, read Bhagavad Gita, please do this, almost like begging. And at the end of 2 hours, one person comes up to me and says, nice pravachan, I liked it, thank you. As if like, it is just like, some movie. That's the feeling I got. Maybe he had something else in mind. But the feeling I got was, yeah, nice entertainment for 2 hours, nice purification, like I was, like a nice, what you say, nice hypnotic session, hypnosis, or nice, nice sauna bath or spa or some massage. I got nice 2-hour mental massage. Thank you so much. So that is the source of doubts, that does this process work? Is all that is being said true? Or is it just some feel-good thing? So having the faith that I shall keep following this process and I will get the result. It will produce the said result. That is the meaning of faith. Continuing to follow this process with faith. Beginning that thing with faith, the journey with faith. So many people, they go to college. Why do they go to college? Why not just stop your education in high school? Because they have faith that, yes, if I get a college degree, my life will be good. I will get a higher salary. I don't have to become a carpenter or or, just, some waiter or this, or do some, I mean, carpenter is a nice job. I'm not saying, please don't take it that way, but any kind of, a, low paying job, you can get a higher paying job, what is called a blue collar job or white collar or whatever it is called, I forget. So that faith, people act based on faith, and then determination. So these are the two things that, yes, I will continue this. In college, for example, the going gets tough. The courses are hard. So you have to be determined. I will not drop out. I want to continue this. I want to finish it. I want to get a degree so that the future life will be good. So you need faith to enroll, and you need determination to stay. So faith helps in enrollment and also helps in staying, but determination helps in staying. So enrollment and staying. So that is the first solution. 6.24. Now 6.25. Now this is very, again, another very important point. So everybody, when we will do japa later on, or when one has to do bhakti yoga, people come and ask me, how can I control my mind? I always say, please go ahead and please go and read 6.24, 25, 26. And if you want more details, listen to the lecture of 24, 25, 26, or do whatever. But this is really telling you how to control the mind, how to make progress. So 6.25, I will now read the Sanskrit. 6.25. Shanai shanai uparamed buddhaya dhriti grihitaya atma samstham manah kritva na kinchid api chintayet. So shanai shanai, these are the very important words. Shanai shanai. I don't know, I messed up the spelling. Shanai. Shanai shanai means, you can just, the direct translation is step by step, or slowly, slowly, or gradually. Step by step. Slowly, slowly, or gradually. All these are meanings. What it means is not overnight or instantly, okay, or in one big quantum leap. Not all these things. A lot of people, one has to realize, millions of lifetimes have been spent in sense gratification. People say, oh yes, I started Bhagavad Gita class 3 months back. I have been reading Bhagavad Gita every day. I'm not feeling any devotion for Krishna. So people want very quick results. Little bit you do and you expect a lot of results. This is nothing but a kind of hypocrisy. So we have spent so much time in, same thing, like if you're smoking for 20 years, you cannot go to the doctor and say, give me one pill and all my lungs or heart or everything problem will go away. So you have to do a long treatment for that. So shanai shanai, slowly, gradually, step by step. Do not expect overnight results. So so many examples are there, and slowly you will build the muscle. And the other point is, you must constantly measure yourself. Measure yourself. So even though you may not see immediate change, you will begin to see gradual change. Just like going to the gym. When you start going to the gym, start doing dieting or exercise, you don't lose 20 pounds in one day. But you keep measuring your weight, isn't it? Everybody who goes to gym has a weighing scale in the house. I'm guaranteeing you. Why? Because they know that the result will not be overnight, but they want to see the results. So every day they get on the scale. Oh yes, half pound lost, half pound, half pound, half pound. So they can see that, yes, it is producing results in the right direction. So in the same way, you can constantly measure yourself by keeping a devotional journal. Keep a devotional journal. Write down all your positive and negative experiences. What did you experience today? What did you apply? Not just what did you read, also in the space of applying it. Somebody tried to make you angry and you resisted it. Write it down. This is what happened and I resisted it. I thought of this verse from Bhagavad Gita and I resisted getting angry. Or anything I was wanting to do some sense gratification and I stopped myself, or whatever it can be. Write it down and then periodically visit the journal. See the journal and you will see that progress that is being made and you will get the confidence, yes, this process is working. So like this, you should try to make progress in your bhakti yoga. Constantly measure and do not expect overnight results. Be determined, keep going. So this whole process is, just think about it like a gym, a spiritual gym, and the same principles apply. 6.26. This is another very, very important verse. And this is the one that we ask to memorize. And this says, Yato yato nishchalati manash chanchalam asthiram tatas tato niyamya etad atmani eva vasham nayet. So what it means is that yato yato nishchalati. Whenever, wherever, jab, yato means jab, you can think of in Hindi, jab, nishchalati, when the mind becomes very agitated. Manash chanchalam asthiram, the mind becomes nischalati because it is very chanchal. Chanchal means very flickering, and asthira. Asthiram means unsteady, cannot stay in one place. What should you do? When this happens, so you say, yes, I'm controlling my mind, I'm controlling, or whatever, not like dhyana yoga, but still you are trying to keep your mind on Krishna. And then it gets deviated. What should you do? You should beat yourself up. You should call yourself a victim. Is that what you should do? No. Do not do that. Don't call yourself a victim. Don't beat yourself up. That's the wrong response. The correct response is the next line. Tatas tato niyamya etad. By following some niyams, atmani eva vasham nayet. Nayet, vasham nayet, apne vash mein le aao. Bring it back. Don't beat yourself up. Oh, I'm so bad, I cannot control my mind. Oh, I'm a victim. Oh, that person, my friend, is able to do, but I am not able to do. None of those things. So don't compare yourself to others. They may have made some spiritual progress in their previous life. You don't know. In this life, maybe you know their whole biography and you know that you may be better than them. I am doing more spiritual work than him, but he is making more progress. So I am bad. I am not good enough. Please don't have any of these thoughts. You don't know what they have done in their past life, what you have done in your past life. And again, there are so many factors that are beyond your control. So don't compare yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Don't victimize yourself. What you should do, the do's, just bring the mind back. Just bring it back. So many, sports coaches, I have read all these motivational sports coaches. What do they say? When you fall down, Just get up and start running. Simple solution. You don't have to do any beating yourself up, any heavy conversations, complex discussions in your mind. No, very simple. If you fall, get up, start running. Get up, start running. Very simple formula. So that is the formula that Lord Krishna is saying, that from wherever the mind wanders due to its flickering and unsteady nature. After all, the mind is flickering and unsteady. That is its nature. One must certainly withdraw it and bring it back under the control of the self. Just as soon as you realize. So if you're doing, let's say, Krishna Bhajan, and suddenly you start thinking about your office work, and you don't know, 10 minutes have passed, and you are not focusing on the bhajan, Krishna Bhajan. Just bring it back. Okay, I'll focus from now on. Don't worry that 10 minutes are lost and beat yourself up and this and that. Okay, so that is the very, very crucial learning from this 6.26. Okay, so 6.26 was the ending of our Dhyana Yoga discussion.
We are not able to see.
Sorry. Dhyana Yoga discussion. So just to quickly summarize, we discussed the what from 6.1 to 6.9, the how from 6.10 to 6.17, stage of Samadhi from 6.18 to 6.23, and how to control the mind from 6.24 to 6.26. And the key ingredients to controlling the mind, once again, faith for enrollment, determination to stay, then gradual or step by step progress, and then when mind wanders, just bring it back. No complicated discussions, no complicated conversations in your head. Just bring it back and keep going. So this is what we discussed so far. Now 6.27 to 6.30, very, very important verses. The Brahman platform, Brahman realization stage, Paramatma realization, and Bhagavan realization. So Lord Krishna is going to describe these three stages. So now we are wrapping up the discussion of Dhyana Yoga and going to enter into the discussion of Bhakti Yoga very soon at the end of the chapter. So there is still some time to go. But Lord Krishna is now just going to summarize, because he has been already hinting at Bhagavan realization, that who is Bhagavan compared to Brahman and Paramatma, that is the highest. He is giving a summary of these three stages, and it is in a sequence that first he describes the Brahman stage, then the Paramatma, and then Bhagavan. And the sequence shows that one is higher than the other. It is not directly mentioned as to who is higher, who is lower in the 6th chapter. That will come in the 15th chapter and then very strongly in the 18th chapter. But again, this is the first reference to these three stages of realization, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, in the Bhagavad Gita at this point. So 6.27, the Brahman stage. Points 27 to 28. Brahman realization stage. So the Sanskrit is Prashanta Manasam Hya Enam Yoginam Sukham Uttamam Upaiti Shanta Rajasam Brahma Bhuta Akalmasham. So the translation is, the yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme, and thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. So here Srila Prabhupada is translating it as the yogi whose mind is fixed on me. So if you see the Sanskrit, the word me is not there yet. Very soon it will come. But Srila Prabhupada is giving a overall integrated full understanding that even one who is approaching the Brahman ultimately is approaching Krishna or is going towards Krishna. And there is no reason to go for Brahman realization. One should directly go for Bhagavan. So that is, so the Sanskrit word that is there is Prashanta Manasam Hyenam. So one whose mind has been fully fixed in Prashant, it's calm, the mind has been calmed. Yoginam Sukham Uttamam. Such a person experiences this Sukham Uttamam, this very high state of happiness. Upaiti Shanta Rajasam. All his mode of passion, Rajas, has been pacified, has been shut down. Brahma Bhuta Akalmasham. So here that is the reference that is being given is that of Brahman realization. Brahma Bhuta Akalmasham. That one realizes that, or one is liberated with identifying with the absolute Brahman. Brahma Bhuta Akalmasham. The next verse is also referring to the Brahman realization, 6.28. Yunjan evam sada atmanam yogi vigata kalmashaha sukhena brahma samsparsham atyantam sukham ashnute. So similar theme, that thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free from all material contamination and achieves the highest state of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. So again, the Lord aspect is not coming here. What is coming here is Sukhena Brahma Samsparshan. He feels very, very happy, a state of very eternal happiness in Brahma Samsparsham. He is able to experience the Brahman. Atyantam Sukham Ashnute. And he achieves great happiness. Yogi Vigata Kalmashaha. All the Kalmasha, all the miseries are wiped out. He's freed, Vigata, freed from all the miseries. And he experiences the state of eternal happiness. Atyantam Sukham Ashnute. So like this is the Brahman realization. Now comes the Paramatma realization in 6.29. So this, since this is coming afterwards, next, this is the Paramatma realization. So this Brahman realization was also captured in chapter number 5. This is the topic of chapter number 6, the Paramatma realization. So here, what is the, now we will go through this verse very carefully. Sarva bhutastham atmanam sarva bhutani cha atmani ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshinaha darshanaha. A true yogi observes me in all beings and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. So in the translation, so let me show this verse to you. So this is chapter 6. Let's do it like this. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, number 29. Observes me. So please look at this verse. Sarva bhutastham atmanam. Sarva bhutani cha atmani. Ikshate yoga yuktatma sarvatra samadarshanaha. In the Sanskrit, where does me come? In the translation, Srila Prabhupada is having me here. A true yogi observes me in all beings, also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me,
Atmanam.
the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. So,
Atmanam is the word.
that may be true, but directly it is not there. Mama, Mai, Mam, Aham, those are the direct meanings of me. So where is the me here? So the answer is, it is not there. The word me is not there. So we'll stay with that thought. We will see here that we will put it here, question. Where is me? In 6.29. Okay, that is a question that we will have. So let us look at just the Sanskrit. Sarva bhutastham atmanam. Sarva bhutastham. That means sarva bhutastham means all the living entities. Bhuta, bhuta means living entities. Stham, situated. Atmanam, that atma which is situated in all the living entities. That is the meaning of the first line. The Atma which is situated in all the living entities. Sarva bhutani cha atmani. And all the living entities are situated in this Atma. Sarva bhutani cha atmani. That living entities are all situated within this Atma. And this Atma is situated within all living entities. Ikshate yoga yuktatma, one who sees this Atma. Ikshate means to see. So again, the concept of seeing the Paramatma, which we had discussed last time, the form of the Paramatma. Ikshate yoga yuktatma, one who is able to see this Atma. Which Atma? Which is in every living entity. And within that Atma, all living entities are there. That Atma, when one is able to see, Sarvatra Samadarshanaha. He sees everything equally. Samadarshanaha. He sees that everything is related to the Supreme Lord, or everything is a part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. So that is the meaning of this. So the question is, which Atma is situated in all living entities? Which Atma is situated in all living entities?
Super soul.
The super soul, the Paramatma. So therefore, this verse, and one who is able to see this Paramatma sees everybody equally. Remember that verse from 5.18. What is that 5.18 verse? Let me show you. Chapter 5, verse number 18. Vidya Vinaya Sampanne Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shuni Chaiva Shwapakecha Panditah Samadarshinaha. So this word Samadarshinaha is coming here. And the same word is coming here, Samadarshanaha. So this Samadarshana means one who sees, this person who has Vidya, sees that that same Paramatma is in Brahman, a Brahman person, Gavi, a cow, Hastini means elephant. Shuni means dog. Shwapake means a dog eater. So one who sees that this Atma, this Paramatma is present in all living entities, he is known as a Pandita. So that is the same meaning that is given here, that one who sees the Paramatma in all living entities, he sees everybody equally, and he is a perfected Dhyana Yogi. He has attained perfection of Dhyana Yoga. So this is referring to 6.29 is referring to Paramatma. Okay, is that clear? We have still not answered this question. Where is me here? This question is still open. Please remember. To answer this question, we will move a little bit forward. We will go to 6.30. Okay. Very beautiful treatment of Paramatma is given here. So please see very carefully. So now we are in 6.30. What does Lord Krishna say in 6.30? Yo mam pashyati sarvatra. So let me open 6.30 just so that you can see it on the screen as I am reading. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvacha mai pashyati tasya aham na pranashyami sacha me na pranashyati. So what does this mean? How many times mama or mai is coming in this verse? So let us see. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra means who sees me, mam. Pashyati means sees, sarvatra, who sees me everywhere. Okay, who sees me everywhere, mam. Sarvam cha mai pashyati. Mai means belongs to me or in me. Sarvam, everybody who sees everybody in me, that I am the container. Everybody is residing in me. Sarvam cha mai pashyati. So same concept is there. Who sees me everywhere? Who sees me in all living entities? Sarvatra. Not only living entities, even in non-living entities. All the atoms also. But the focus here is the word mam. And sarvam cha mai pashyati. Who sees that everything is in me? Tasyaham na pranashyami. That to him I am not lost. Aham. I am not lost. Pranashyami means lost or destroyed, which means he is able to directly come to me. Tasya aham na pranashyami. I am not lost to him. Sa cha me na pranashyati. And he is not lost to me, which means I remember him. He remembers me all the time. I remember him. So let us understand this. What is being said here? What is being said here is that in the previous verse, 6.29, it was being said the Atma which is in everyone. In 6.30, Lord Krishna is saying that who sees me in everyone. And everyone in me. Isn't this the same thing that was said before? Just that we replaced the word me with Atma. Isn't it? Now in 6.30, Lord Krishna has directly replaced that with me. And Lord Krishna is saying he is my true devotee. He is never lost to me, which means I remember him all the time. And he remembers me all the time. So this was 6.30 A, comma B. C, comma D basically means that he is my devotee. Or you can think like, he loves me. We all are very much accustomed to Bollywood language. So he loves me, I love him. I love you, you love me kind of language. So very simple language. He loves me, I love him. Okay, now one can think, so is this clear? Have we answered this question? Where is the me? It is the same verse, the same context in 6.29, but in 6.30, Lord has replaced it with me. Now one can think that is 6.29 versus 6.30. Is Lord talking about two different things? Okay, there is some Atma in everyone, and Krishna is also in everyone. Okay, maybe they are two different things. So we still don't know if this Atma and Krishna are one and the same. Me in everyone. I will just use a different color. Krishna is saying me in everyone. I am in everyone. And in the previous verse, he was saying that the Atma, which is situated in all living entities. So maybe in every living entity, there is Krishna and there is some Paramatma, but they are not the same. One could get this doubt. So in 6.31, what does Krishna say? In 6.31, he says, such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the super soul, knowing that I and the super soul are one. There is no difference between the super soul and me. Our one remains always in me in all circumstances. So the Sanskrit is Sarva Bhuta Sthitam Yo Mam Bhajati Ekatvam Asthitaha Sarvatha Vartamano Api Sayogi Mai Vartate. So in every living entity, Sarva Bhuta Sthitam Yo Mam Bhajati Ekatvam Asthitaha. The word Ekatvam is very important here. That Sarva Bhuta Sthitam Yo Mam. One who knows that the one who is situated in all the living entities, Sarva Bhuta Sthitam Yo Mam, is none other than me. Bhajati Ekatvam, who worships that one, knowing that those two are the same, Ekatvam. They are situated, Ekatvam Asthita, they are that entity that is situated is none other than me. Sarvatha Vartamano Api. In all situations, sa yogi mai vartate. Such a person is always, he remains my devotee, or he is my devotee. So in 6.31, Lord is clarifying that Paramatma and Krishna are one. So Paramatma is situated in all the living entities, and that Paramatma is none other than Krishna himself. But, so we saw from 6.27 to 28 is Brahman. 6.29 was Paramatma. And 6.30 was Bhagavan. We saw 4 instances of Mam and Aham. And 6.31, Lord Krishna is saying Paramatma and Bhagavan, or me, are same. Okay, is this clear? This whole sequence of 5 verses is very important to understand Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan and the oneness of all of them. So they are the same understanding, just different levels of revelation, different levels of exposition. Bhagavan is the highest exposition or the maximum, the full exposition. Paramatma is less and Brahman is even lesser. But they are the three expositions of the same one absolute truth. Then 6.32, Lord Krishna is finally summarizing Dhyana Yoga. The summary of Dhyana Yoga is that one who has seen the Paramatma in everyone's heart. That is the summary of Dhyana Yoga, realizing Paramatma, isn't it? So that is what is coming up in 6.32. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and distress, O Arjuna. So such a person is very compassionate. This is a comparison verse where somebody who is a dhyana yogi, he is not indifferent to the rest of the people. He is very compassionate. He sees by comparing himself to the others. He sees that I have the Paramatma in me and everybody else also has the same Paramatma in everyone in their own heart. So myself and them are exactly the same. There is no difference between me and him. And this is how he sees enemy and friend or honor and somebody who honors him or dishonors him, etc., they all as the same. Because he just sees the Paramatma in their heart. So by his own comparison also means that he also is very compassionate. He sees the fault, like we say, you must first see your faults before seeing others' faults. And you must see others' good things before seeing your own good qualities. The good qualities should be seen in others. The bad qualities should be seen in yourself. And this is a very compassionate statement. One sees that if somebody is doing something wrong or somebody is falling down, he sees, yes, I was also fallen down at some time. So he is just at that stage. So if I could rise up, he also should be given a chance to rise up. So he does not look at others as, he does not look down upon others. So that is the meaning of this verse. And so this is the summary of Dhyana Yoga, that he sees Paramatma in everyone. And by comparing everybody else to himself, he is compassionate to everybody else. So sees Paramatma in everyone and is compassionate to everyone. Or I can say, therefore, is compassionate to everyone because he sees Paramatma in everyone. Okay, so this is the conclusion of Dhyana Yoga. So now let us see if anybody has raised their hand. And the first person to raise the hand is Arjun. Arjun says, 1 minute, sir, I have a question. So 6.33 is Arjuna Uvacha. Arjun raises the hand. Okay. So we will start with 6.33. But before addressing Arjun's raised hand, let us see if anybody else has raised their hand here. So there are some questions or some comments on the chat. Let's see. So one question is, why as a human being, when we are in pain, we easily doubt? That is the question. So the answer is very simple. First of all, you should not doubt, because everything is happening as per the law of karma, or as per our past actions, past deeds, etc. Or, we have discussed, I don't want to go into great detail. There are obviously some exceptions to that, but in general, that is happening. The essence of the question that I sense, and I would request clarification if that is not the essence, but the essence of the question as I see it, why do we doubt when we are in pain, but not when we are enjoying or when we are happy? The answer to that part is because when we are happy, when we are comfortable, we feel that the process is making or is working as it is supposed to work. So we have an attachment to positive results. We have an attachment to quick results. What does gradual, shanai mean? Gradual means that the progress will be slow. Sometimes the progress could even be, is it drawing? Yeah. Could be like this. Okay. But if you see only this part of the progress, what is the progress? It goes down, isn't it? It's going from point A to point B. A and B. It's going down. But gradual progress, this is the graph of gradual progress. And this is basically when we are not able to, these are the points. Here are the points when we are not able to control our mind or not able to follow the rules, whatever rules or regulations that we have set. And when we see that portion, then we doubt. Therefore, to eliminate doubts, you must constantly measure. So if your general graph is going like this, so therefore, this is the importance of keeping a journal, so that when you are in pain, you will be able to see this is temporary pain. In general, I am making the progress in the right direction. Now, if you are not making progress in the right direction at all, if you are going like this, which means you are going down, then you and I can have a discussion one-on-one. Definitely, you're doing something wrong. You're not applying the principles correctly. So we should not get disheartened. We should not get discouraged when we see temporary downturns. And that leads to doubt, but therefore the constant measurement, constant sort of a keeping track of where we are going definitely helps. And the journal also helps us in these points. When we are going up, then we can say, yes, this process is working. So that should help to counter the doubts. Yes, it worked. If you study hard, will you get good marks in an exam? Tell me. Generally, yes. Now, let's say because you didn't study one particular chapter, there were 5 chapters. One chapter you didn't study that well. It is possible that all the questions come from that chapter. It is possible. And then you fail or you get very low marks. Will you say hard work never pays off? No. There are so many other tests you gave, so many other exams. Because of hard work, you got good marks. Remember that. Don't just base your doubts. Don't let doubt enter your mind based on just some instances. Look at the overall. So we have a very short memory. And also we have a very negative memory. Negative memory means we remember our misgivings more than our blessings. People are always complaining. Isn't that's why there is this saying, I was complaining about my what you call small shoes till I saw a person with no feet. So we always count our misgivings and we forget our blessings. Therefore, it is said, count your blessings, count what you have. And that will give you the faith and the determination to keep going. Otherwise, it is very easy to give into doubt. That is the reason for keeping a journal. And the other point is, when you make good progress in bhakti, we must understand it is because of my adoption of the rules and regulations. You must attribute these up points, whatever I showed here, or maybe from here to here, these up points to your efforts in following the rules and regulations. This will help you remind, yes, rules and regulations help. Let me not lose faith. All that is part of journal keeping. Next question is, how do we distinguish between Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan? So we discussed the theory of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan in the last class. However, there is no need for us to distinguish and I don't know how to distinguish any one of them other than the theoretical aspect, because I have not seen or realized Brahman or Paramatma, far from it. So I don't know how to distinguish. The theory is there. However, the practical point is we must follow the principles of Bhakti Yoga and directly try to get or develop a loving relationship with Bhagavan. It is not possible to develop a relationship with an abstract entity such as Brahman or with Paramatma who does not reciprocate in a loving way. There are three aspects of the absolute truth: Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Sat means eternality. Again, this is theory. I will not be able to explain it in much sort of practical application. This is Chit means knowledge. But Ananda means happiness or joy, or in some sense you can say love. So Sat potency is experienced, one realizes this through Brahman, the Chit through Paramatma, but the Ananda comes when we attach ourselves or when we try to build a relationship with Bhagavan. So I will not be able to explain much in detail what is the experience or what is the distinction between Brahman, Paramatma, or Sat and Chit realization. But Ananda is very simple and very straightforward. That when we develop or try to develop a loving relationship with Bhagavan, there is a lot of joy and happiness. And I can say that I have experienced some of it when I am standing in front of a deity, when I am reading Srimad Bhagavatam, or so many other devotional activities. I have experienced at times great, very, very great joy and happiness. And so that Ananda is only available, the Sat, Chit, and Ananda, all three are available when we try to develop a loving relationship with Bhagavan. So that is all I would like to say in answer to this question.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is, how to see Paramatma in someone who constantly keeps hurting us physically, emotionally, etc. So good question. Let me copy this and paste it here. So how to see Paramatma in someone who constantly keeps hurting us? Very nice question, very practical question. So the answer is, first of all, remember, gradually. 6.25. Not overnight. Okay. So if you have started practicing Krishna Bhakti recently, it will be very hard to see whether it is Paramatma or whether to see the good in somebody who has been hurting you, or see them equally, or not have any hatred or any feelings of resentment towards them. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take some practice. Okay. So the advice that I would like to give is continue, or start and continue to practice Krishna Bhakti. And we had discussed at a so two things: material solution and spiritual solution. Material solution is in the domain of TMI. Remember TMI?
Body mind.
Tolerate, mitigate, and immigrate. This is at a material level. At a spiritual level, continue Krishna Bhakti and pray for them. So, material solutions are temporary, but they do give relief, just like Tylenol. Tylenol does not cure the disease, but it does give temporary relief. Spiritual solutions are permanent. So you should do both. So at a material level, that depends on how much the suffering or the pain is. It may not be possible to tolerate. Then you mitigate it. You try to do something about it. Maybe talk to that person, maybe do something else. And if you tell more specifically, we can discuss. Maybe if you are, if you want, we can have a one-on-one discussion also. And immigrate is also a solution. If it is completely outside the scope of tolerance and mitigation, there is no solution possible, then leave the situation. Physically detach from the situation. First, try to mentally detach, but mental detachment is a form of mitigation. Okay, I will not bother, I will not care. Let that person do what he wants, he or she. I will not, let it affect me. That is mental immigration at the mind level. If that is not working, then finally the last step is physical immigration. And if it is between husband wife, it is called divorce. It is whatever may be the situation. If it was between two neighbors, then you go and live in a different neighborhood. If it is between boss and employee, then it is called resign. I don't want to work for you, I'll go work for some other boss. There are many names for that solution. The spiritual solution is to request for Krishna's help, that Krishna, please relieve me of this pain so that I can continue my bhakti to you in a more peaceful state. You are my friend, Krishna, Suhridam Sarvabhutanam, please help me. And also pray for that person, that person is doing that because of his past karmic activities. This is like the poison. A snake is also a living entity, but a snake is considered a very low class living entity, not because he is suffering, but he is spewing poison. One who spews poison is also very low class, even though it may appear he is very strong and he is harming others. Just the fact that you are spewing out poison means that you are full of poison. It may not kill your body, but your soul is completely dead in that sense, so to say. Okay. So you pray for them that they are relieved from this poison, this bag of poison that they are carrying and spewing around everywhere. You pray for them because Krishna will take away their bag of poison and then they will be poison free. So you pray for them and you pray that you also are saved from their poison. That is the spiritual solution. Ask for Krishna's help through Krishna Bhakti. There is no problem. Many devotees come and ask, should I ask Krishna to solve my material problems? That is like asking Krishna, Bhagwan, ye sawa rupya le lo, exam mein pass kara do. And after you pass the exam, then who is Krishna? I don't know. Which Krishna? I forget Krishna completely. Not like that. That is called deal making. That is called trying to cheat Krishna.
Business.
Hmm?
That is business.
That is business. And that too, you are a cheater business. You said you will fulfill your end of the bargain and you forgot.
Yeah.
Okay. But here it is different. You are saying that Krishna, please remove this pain so that I can engage in your bhakti more seriously, with more vigor, with more enthusiasm. So like that, we can pray to Krishna. Definitely we can 100% we can pray to Krishna to remove our pain and suffering. But our consciousness should be that our consciousness is situated in Krishna Bhakti, not so that once this pain is gone, I will go enjoy sense gratification separate from Krishna. Who is Krishna? Forget him. To hell with Krishna. Not with that consciousness. Okay. Last question that is there. Okay, same question. So I think this next question is very exactly the same. I think every part of the answer I gave is, so this question is also the same. Let me paste it here, side by side. Seeing Paramatma in everyone. There are many extremely bad people around us. How can we see Paramatma in them? Same question. So I think the answer is exactly the same. Okay. I hope you see it that way, who asked this question. If you think you were asking something different, or the theme or the essence of your question was different, please speak up.
No, you answered it, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So bad people will not go away. One thing you must remember, and this hopefully is a statement of compassion. What I said a little while ago, that the poison that is filled in their body, which they are spewing out. Well, that's what you said, right? Evil people around us, they are just spewing out poison, correct? That's a general way of saying they are evil. Please have compassion on them. Why I'm saying that? Because it means if they are spewing out poison, they themselves have poison within them. And that's not a good thing for them. So they are carrying much more poison within themselves than they can spew out. So please consider this as a point of compassion for them. This should generate some compassion in your heart for them, and pray that they are relieved of this poison. And this should help you to generate some goodwill or for such people. Okay, so we were not able to finish the 6th chapter today, but this is a very important section. From 33 to 47 is arguably the most important part of chapter 6. And we will see some mind-blowing aspects. Krishna really opens up about several key concepts of chapter 6 here. So please do not miss the next class. Absolutely do not miss the next class. This half or the second part of chapter 6 is extremely important for the understanding of how Krishna Bhakti and how spiritual progress works. And this will fill you with a lot of confidence in doing spiritual practices. So please make it a point to attend the next class. Any last questions, final questions? We are at 8:33. So we will stop here and we will see you next time and complete chapter 6, hopefully start chapter 7 if possible.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Happy New Year.
And
Hare
yes,
Krishna.
thank you for reminding. Happy New Year to everyone.
Everybody, Happy New Year.
I pray that all
Yeah,
of
Happy
you
New
stay
Year to
happy
everyone.
and
Happy New Year.
enthusiastic.
Very
and
happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year,
Happy New Year.
everyone.
Hare Krishna.
And Pranam.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.